Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scripture for August the 6th. Your readings today are in Ezra chapter 4, just verse 24, Ezra 5 and 6, 1 Corinthians 3, 5 through 23, Psalm 29, 1 through 11, and Proverbs chapter 20, verses 26 through 27. Now, Ezra, again, continues to be this beautifully compelling story. And remember, it wasn't told in chronological order. So you had the overview, and now you're going to start getting into the details of those stories and how Ezra ended up going down and taking charge of things. So pay attention to the story. Look at God's faithfulness. Look at their faithfulness to God and how they didn't allow external forces, and this is a big theme in both Ezra and Nehemiah, they didn't allow external forces to keep them from carrying out God's plan and God's goal, which is a great reminder for us. But today we're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and we're going to look at one of the most misquoted scriptures in the Bible, or misused scriptures, I should say, because there's a bunch of them. Let's be honest, For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you. We love to take that one out of context. Or judge not, lest ye be judged. Again, another one out of context. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 has one of those as well. In verse 16, when it says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" And we use this verse all the time to talk about how we need to make sure we're eating healthy and taking healthy and being aware. And while there are verses in the Bible that do talk to that issue, this is not one of them. This verse right here is actually talking about salvation, and it's actually talking about who exactly is the foundation in our lives. Paul has been visiting and trying to get the people in Corinth to recognize that it doesn't matter whether it was Paul or Apollos or someone else, Peter, whoever it was that planted the seed. Only God is the one who gives growth. That's what he says in verse 7. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages. But we are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field. Paul is trying to take it out of the context of which camp is greater, and say there's only one camp, and it's the camp of God, and it is the greatest of all. And so when Paul gets down here to verse 16 and he talks about how we're God's temple, and if anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy. What he's saying is, don't wear away at the foundation of other people because of these silly arguments. Do not take down other people's foundations built upon God by telling them they need to follow Paul's camp or Apollos' camp. Let no one deceive himself. Paul says, if any one of you thinks he's wise in this age, let him become a fool. Don't think that you are more learned than someone else. Don't think that you are more educated than someone else. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, for the wisdom of this world is folly with God. In other words, Paul's telling people, don't pick sides. You are all under Christ. That's what he says here. Let no one boast in men, for all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Kepha or who are the world or life or death or the present or the future. All of those are yours. That's what Paul says. And you are Christ's, and Christ is God's. That's really the argument. It's not about whether we should be eating healthy, which we should. It's not about whether we should take care of our bodies, which we should. There are plenty of other verses to talk about it, but what this one is talking about is making sure that we're not picking sides when there are no sides to be picked. This is a great argument against looking at people from other denominations and looking at them and going, oh well, they're Methodist or they're Baptist or they're Lutheran. Look, if they all follow the same, if they have the same theological ideas, in other words, do they believe in the Trinity? Do they believe in the inerrancy of Scripture? Do they believe that Jesus Christ is who the Scripture says he is? If they believe how salvation comes about, if they believe about the fall of humanity, if they believe that Jesus is going to come back physically at some point, if they believe all of these things and some of the other major theologicals, then they are all part of the same umbrella. Now, there may be differences, but the differences shouldn't wear away at other people's foundations. We shouldn't be looking at those and saying, oh, well, you're this or that. That's what Paul's warning about. And if we're not careful, we can fall into that same trap today. The truth is, we're all a part of God's kingdom. We're all supposed to be striving to make God look good. It may happen a little differently in various denominations, but ultimately, as it says here, we are all Christ's, and Christ is God's. Okay, that's it for today.